Hi, everyone. Welcome to Threat Talk, a LinkedIn series from BioCatch. On Threat Talk, you'll hear from our BioCatch thought leaders and experts about current fraud trends they're seeing in the field, in their regions, and around the world. I'm Jay Jones, Senior Thought Director at BioCatch. Thank you for joining us today. On our previous Threat Talk, we featured one of our analysts, Aaron England, or one of our threat analysts, Aaron England. So be sure to check that one out if you missed it. In this edition, we welcome Edgar Zayas, one of BioCatch's global advisors. Working with our threat analysts and other BioCatch fraud experts, Edgar uses his deep experience in forensic investigation, cybersecurity, and the financial industry to recognize fraud and develop ways to defeat it. Today, Edgar will discuss the continued rise of remote access scams, particularly investment scams, where they are, what they are, and more importantly, how to stop them. Edgar, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I know, like me, Edgar, you're relatively new to BioCatch, but you have an extensive experience as a fraud fighter. So can you tell us a little more about that and your role here at BioCatch as a global advisor?
Thank you, Jay. Yes, I'm indeed new. I've just been on board for past couple of years. Couple months. As a global advisor, my job is to keep a close eye on the ever-changing threat landscape worldwide. That gives me the ability to advise our internal teams and also our customers on how we can both improve our capabilities at BioCatch to combat fraud, and also how financial institutions can better leverage behavioral biometrics. I work really closely with them on how to operationalize the investment they've made in us, from using the technology for fraud purposes such as account takeover, account opening, and also now being applied to the AML threat landscape as well.
Speaking of your unique experience, you actually first worked with BioCatch as a customer. Is that right? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes. So I've been working with BioCatch for nearly 4 years now, actually. My first exposure to BioCatch was in 2019 when I joined one of the major banks. I started managing the cyber fraud team at a major Australian bank where we normally handled phishing and malware-related frauds, but quickly had to pivot over into the scams world. When COVID struck, we started seeing a spike in very heartbreaking romance scams and puppy scams. But not only that, it started evolving a lot into investment scams and the remote access scams as well. We would see spikes in stimulus-related and payments scams, job scams, where inevitably these then change into a muling problem. So we got a lot of money laundering and muling. And it was quick for us to realize that the traditional way that we were fighting fraud with device information, network information, and transactional data was not going to cut it for this changing threat landscape. And fortunately, at that time, we were in a proof of concept with BioCatch, and we quickly spun that up and operationalized it to start making a difference. And indeed, it did.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's scary stuff, those scams, scary and tragic, a lot of these. So I'd love to know more about, I know you and the other global advisors, I work with you guys a lot. You stay plugged into what's happening across the fraud landscape globally. And there's a lot going on. Fraudsters remain very busy, unfortunately. Today, we'd love to hear your insights on one trend in particular, remote access scams. And I'm new too, so I'm learning as we go, but I would love to know, I hear the term RAT, R-A-T, the acronym. It's used throughout the industry. Sometimes it's signified both remote access Trojans, sometimes even remote access tools, very different things. Can you give us an overview of remote access scams and maybe start with defining a few of the terms?
Yeah, so it is a common one. You have the confusion around what the term RAT means and remote access in general. So I'll start by defining when we're talking about the MO in itself. So remote access scams, the abbreviation that financial institutions use is RAS for that. That is the MO. What we're seeing is that one MO involves a fraudster doing things, and another MO involves a scammer doing things. And there's these two types of personas are very different. So the fraudster originally uses what we knew as RATs, as remote access Trojans, aka malware. So this is what they would use. It's specific software that's made to put into a computer or to a phone with intent to commit a crime. So this software has no other thing other than to infect and do damage, such as, we've seen data breaches galore in the past couple of years. We've also seen the rise of ransomware. We've also can see that there is credential stealing off of devices as well for banking applications and business email compromise as well. So all of these things usually happen because there is some form of rat or remote access Trojan inside a device. Now, the other, again, with the rise of scams, what we started seeing is a pivot of the word rat into the use of remote administration tools. And these are real software. These are softwares that are commercial, and they have their legitimate uses, from system administrators that are just managing servers at work that are remote or on the cloud, or even just customer service, helping people solve problems with their computer, or people that were working from home in COVID remoting into their work computers from home to access files and different things, different systems. So these remote administration tools, these rats, then were started to be leveraged by scammers, not fraudsters, scammers. And the main difference there is a scammer normally is trying to convince you into doing the transaction, into taking action for them. And this is a very important MO for us, because what they're trying to do is since you are doing it, your behavior, according to them, seems to be, you doing it. If the bank chooses to call and ask, did you do this transaction? Well, you did. So you will answer yes and hang up the phone and approve a transaction. So scammers want you doing ultimately the transaction.
Yeah, that is frightening on a lot of levels. And it seems like now the age we're in, unfortunately, is that it's human-targeted scams, and those humans, the victims, can actually play a part in the scam itself unwillingly. So scary stuff, and I'm interested to learn more about how banks and financial institutions can detect that and protect their customers. Are we seeing a rise in these events in your region globally, particularly investment scams? Money laundering, we're hearing more and more about, but investment scams in particular, are we seeing a rise in that?
Yeah, so definitely a rise in scams all around, and the MOs that the scammers use when they call customers are just all over the place. There's the basic ones that we see worldwide or around just purchase refund scams, the IT support scams where your virus software has expired, internet provider scams, tax office, and other forms of government agency impersonation. But that the one that's been really hitting is the one you just asked about, which is investment scams. There is a plethora of financial advisors and brokers out there offering different products, setting up what looks like legitimate websites. And this is kind of a bit of a throwback to the olden days of the stock market, where they had these boiler rooms where people would call up. We've all seen movies like The Wolf of Wall Street where the people would call up. Well, now they're doing different things. They're setting up websites that look extremely legitimate. They're not these fake looking ugly websites that we used to see. They're really
misspellings and typos and all that.
Yeah, these are quality websites. And what happens is that instead of cold calling, it is the victim themselves is engaging these through Google searches. So we've seen this sharp rise of that. And where it actually meets with the remote access world is these scammers want to be extremely helpful and provide great customer service. So they actually help the victim by using one of these tools to log into their computer and help them set up brokerage accounts or crypto accounts or new bank accounts. But in this generosity and of helping them set themselves up, what they're really doing is they're qualifying the customer to see if they indeed have the funds. So they'll trick you into that process, into logging into your bank account and seeing how much funds you have available. So now they got a better idea how much work they're going to put into you. Right. Then they will use that opportunity as well to try to steal maybe your credentials, because they'll use those later for a couple bits. Remember, we want to try as a scammer to get you to do the transaction, but I'm still going to steal those credentials to keep an eye on what you're doing. and a couple other fun bits later. They also help the customers set up the accounts with crypto exchanges, and it all looks like the customer is doing it, because indeed they are doing it. And they also steal their biometrical information, or biographical information, I should say, names, addresses, all these things while they're filling them out. So, and they're watching with that remote access session, they're watching all of this live. I can share that one of the biggest issues that we're having right now is that when they steal these credentials and set up all these accounts, the scammer is using both the victim's account to mule money. So they will inevitably use other people's funds, send it from, let's say, you to me, and it looks like between banks, it looks like a normal transaction. It's not going to an odd account, it's going to an established account. So they try to use these victims, one victim to another victim, or use the new accounts that they've set up for victims on a crypto exchange or another location, to move these funds to try to make them look as clean and legit as possible. So it's not just a fraud problem, it's an AML problem as well, because we got all this money laundering going on, and unknowingly the victim is part of this money laundering.
For them, which can be a mix of old tactics and the latest tools like AI and bots, to create these what can be devastating crimes. What can financial institutions do to spot and prevent these crimes? It sounds like it would be a difficult task.
Yeah, indeed it is. Like, as I mentioned earlier, that back in COVID, we realized quickly that the traditional way of fighting fraud was just not going to cut it. These scams were evading all these detections that we had in, because it's indeed the customer doing the transaction. So we quickly realized that the one thing that everyone, and not just financial institutions, we're going to see this going into e-commerce and into other verticals, but implementing behavioral biometrics is something that must be done. It gives the financial institution the ability to not just detect, but they can also prevent the financial transactions from even happening in the first place. Often we can do this weeks, not just days, but some weeks earlier, because the behavior starts to change early on, depending on the fraud MO. So on investment scams, they're a really long game. You can see that initial behavior happening, and then as you analyze the customer's behavior, especially if it does get to the transactional part, the fraud analyst has the information they need to actually do the forensics and say, you know what, I'm about to call this customer. They've been behaving in a certain way recently. I definitely believe that this is an investment scam, or it's a scam of some sort. And once they have the customer on the phone, they have that behavioral change that they can speak to the customer about, because the customers will deny it. They'll say, no, they're smart. This is a person that they know because they researched it and they did the work. And again, it's having these behavioral points that indicate that something's not right. And historically, not just with that customer, but throughout your customer population that has experienced this type of fraud as well, it's extremely important to have that telemetry.
Right, because it sounds like, I mean, this is psychology plays a big part of this too, in human emotions, which we all know can be very complex. But it sounds like this approach is the way to see the behavior that's going on behind the what's really driving the action of the victim. What's one piece of advice you give to financial institutions to protect their customers?
Look, I came from the cybersecurity industry into banking about 4 years ago, and every year in the cybersecurity industry, there was always a new buzzword or blinky light technology that would save everybody from everything. And here we are, it's 2023, we got data breaches happening and ransomware left and right, and scams and fraud just still doing its thing. When it comes to behavioral biometrics, though, this is not the case. This is not a buzzword. This is not an industry buzzword that is going to die off. This is serious technology. It is not a nice to have. It's turning into a must have. And again, it's not just financial institutions, but just across different vectors. You have to learn how your customer looks and just the population in general as well, and have that in your arsenal, so that when you're allowing accounts to get open, when you have genuine customers operating, or you have people now operating accounts in your business that shouldn't be doing what they're doing, you have that behavioral knowledge that's no longer an option or a luxury. Got regulators are looking into it. There are posts out there where regulators are starting to use actually that language as well. So it's not just a fancy word, it is something that's here to stay. And financial institutions and other vectors should really start looking into it, into those different areas of their business.
Great, fantastic. Edgar, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks to everyone joining. Thanks to your dog in the background there. I think it was trying to say hello to you there, Edgar. Check out biocatch.com for more details on remote access scams and other fraud scam issues. We'll see you at the next Threat Talk. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Edgar.
Thank you, Jay.